Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Simple Worship Conversation, affectionately known by me as the morning program with Shannon Moore. And Whitney, I'm so glad to have you on this Zoom edition of the Simple Worship Conversation. You want to tell everybody who you are?
I would love to. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Shannon, to your morning show. I'm Reverend Whitney Muller,
Program.
program, excuse me. I'm Reverend Whitney Muller Cole, and I serve as the senior minister at Creekwood Christian Church in Flower Mound, Texas.
And this is your second time on the Simple Worship
It
Conversation.
is indeed. It is
So
indeed.
this year, I'm really expanding the scope of guests, and so thank
Ooh,
you for coming back and being on the show.
it's my pleasure. Thank you for thinking of me.
So you know how this works. I'll read a scripture, and since Simple Worship is a short service, we meet for 20 minutes on Sunday morning in person and on Zoom. Little hybrid thing there. It's only 20 minutes, and so this conversation is 10 minutes. So I'll read the scripture, and then I'll set a timer, and we'll just talk about the scripture for 10 minutes.
Sounds
There
great.
you go. All right, so I'm going to get my timer all set up. It's already there. Okay. And our scripture today is from Mark's Gospel. For those of you who saw or were in Simple Worship last week, we read a call story of when Jesus called his first disciples, as it's told in the Gospel of John. Today we are hearing a similar story, but told from Mark's perspective. So here we are in Mark chapter 1, verses 16 through 20. So here is the scripture reading. As Jesus passed along the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fish for people." And immediately they left their nets and followed him. As he went a little farther, he saw James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, who were in their boat mending the nets. Immediately he called them, and they left their father, Zebedee, in the boat with the hired men and followed him. All right, that's the scripture. I'm going to start our timer. What do you think about this scripture?
I like it. I think it can
I'm a
stay.
fan.
No, I think one of the things that I love most about reading the Gospels and knowing that there are four of them, fun trivia fact for you at home, is that they all have a different place where they want to pick up and begin in the life of Jesus. And Mark is so no nonsense about all of that, right? Like we're starting with, and now for something completely different. Here is Jesus going and finding these people to be his disciples. And I just, yeah, there's something invigorating about that and thinking about how for those who are joining Mark in this journey as the first hearers of this scripture, as folks who are reading it, no exposition required, that it sort of seems to be a story that they're all in on. And so that's, I don't know, that's interesting for me thinking about.
It's sort of like the Cliff Note version or the
Yeah.
Spark Notes of the Gospels.
Yes, like there will be a test on this whole Jesus thing, but it's not the test you were thinking. You actually, it's just multiple choice. Yeah.
Right, and it's just so succinct and boom, boom, boom. Um,
Yeah.
I was having a discussion with some folks about this text, and it always strikes me, especially when he calls James and John, who are with their father, um, I guess, in the family business, and
Yeah.
they're mending the nets, and Jesus calls them, and they leave, and I said, Zebedee must have been a lot more understanding than my father,
No doubt.
because my dad would not have been okay
We
with
did not leave. You don't leave in the middle of chores.
no.
That's not allowed.
Yeah.
No, I agree. Yeah. And we don't actually know what Zebedee does, right? Like, it's just like, okay, gotta go. Bye. um, I don't know. And you think about some of the other teachings and things that we hear later about, the role of family in our lives. And it is sort of interesting to think about, the idea of Jesus saying, in order for you to follow me, all of these other commitments, all of these other relationships that you might have in the world, those do come second to the commitment and relationship you have to me. And so seeing that modeled here as a real like practical application, this is happening piece
And
versus,
right out of the gate.
yeah, right out of the gate, and like not not like some theological statement, but genuinely like, hey, for you to feel so inspired just by my sheer presence in this moment that you're willing to forsake this, your livelihood, your family. I mean, unless like they just really hated fish and their dad.
Both.
Yeah,
And the hired men.
yeah, they're just not into it. I don't know.
I, I read an article not too long ago about this text that said, that by their leaving, they may have put the family welfare in jeopardy. If Zebedee and we don't know quite as much about the other two, but with James and John, we get a little broader picture that they're with their dad and there are hired, but that he probably depended on those four hands
Yeah,
to help, and to think that by their making this decision to follow Jesus immediately, as Mark likes to say so often,
right.
that his business, his family's welfare may have been in jeopardy, and they were okay with that. And
Yeah, I think that's a pretty powerful insight for sure.
and really not the American capitalistic kind of way of doing things.
No, no, not at all. I mean, and I think that it's one of those things, that we sometimes hear it jokingly said, but I do think that it's really important to one, recognize that Jesus maybe predates capitalism. But two, if you're thinking about holding a worldview where capitalism is sort of what we lift up as the way of the world, an ideal in our minds for how the world should be functioning. I mean, this this passage in Mark is kind of a beginning taste of, I've got bad news for you when you learn about the teachings of Jesus. Capitalism doesn't fit in quite so well into that framework. It is a completely different set of priorities and values that we're seeing out of the gate, brought up and put on the forefront as being the things that matter. That financial security isn't necessarily at the top of the list. And I think, yeah, I think that's really interesting to think about.
Well, and I try to put myself in this situation and think, how would I respond if I were in the boat and Jesus called to me? I mean, I'm a person who really likes security. I like to know what the day is going to hold. I like to know, um, where I'm going to be, what I'm going to be doing, and I don't
Yeah,
do really well with getting pulled out of a routine.
right.
I mean, even something as simple as we're having spaghetti for dinner and then, oh, we're out of tomato sauce. And then I'm like, well, I don't want anything then.
Yeah, the day is ruined. I'm going to bed. Yeah. Well, and I think, like not being able to recognize what would I do in that moment, because I'm with you. I don't know that, it would take a lot for me to be willing to draw myself out of my routine or my expectation or the goal and priorities that that I had already set. And so it always brings me back to that place of wondering, what was it about this encounter and interaction with Jesus that made that worth the risk? Because I think that we live every single day, right, doing a risk assessment in our lives essentially. And so wondering, what made this the worthwhile risk, and wondering for myself, what would it take for me to make that risk? And I don't know if I know the answer.
Well, and then with this, with the, see what I'm going to do here, the hook that Jesus uses uh,
Uh,
to draw them in. He says, I will make you fish for people. A new occupation. I mean, he
yeah,
ties what they do to what they're
right.
really doing together. but in that same article I read, I was pulling out a piece of paper. It's Cynthia Allen is who she's a Methodist minister. She noted that when you pull a fish out of water, it dies.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we look a little deeper at what Jesus is saying here, you're going to fish for people. You're pulling them just as he's doing with these guys.
Uh-huh.
You're pulling them out of what they know,
Cynthia Allen, you go.
right? And that's really powerful.
I've never thought of that, and I really like that.
And there's even a baptism, overtone to that, lifting up out of the water into a new way of life and dying to, what you have known and to what you depended on and knew to be true. And now you're placing all of your trust in this gospel that is so compelling.
Yes.
Yeah. So I got to hand it to Cynthia Allen for lifting up that image. It's going to be one I think about from now on when I hear this.
No, I love that. I love that a lot. Well, and even thinking too about how powerful that imagery of being lifted up out of the water is. And I'm even just thinking about maybe not when I've been in the baptismal pool, though that's part of it, I think, of having had the opportunity to baptize people and kind of seeing the complete disorientation that happens, even though right, that this person is about to dunk you underwater, and you can kind of feel the moment their body tenses up and they're like, what's happening? And when you pull them back out of that water, how like you do feel almost an ontological shift and like a recognition and realization of, wow, something is different now. So I just, yeah.
I'm really grateful that I was baptized when I was a little older and by immersion. Nothing against anyone who was sprinkled, but it's such a memory. Like as you're talking about that, I can return to that trepidation, that tenseness, and then that elation when I came up out of the water. I'll never, you don't forget that.
Yeah.
And I imagine that's sort of how these disciples felt when Jesus pulled them up out of the life they knew. And now sort of now what?
Yeah.
Is going to happen.
So where are we going? What are we doing?
That's our timer.
Well, hey.
So, that seems like a pretty good place to stop, though I could talk to you for, a lot longer than this. But
I was going to say at least another 10 minutes.
But we have rules on the morning program with Shannon Moore. And so
I see the producer over to the side. Wrap up.
Whitney, it is always a pleasure to talk to you about anything, but
likewise.
I especially appreciate you coming on to talk about this scripture and so that folks can hear your perspective. So
you're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
And hope you all have a great week, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.